has erupted at other universities too. This is very close to where our studios in fact are here at the SABC. In fact, I'm just a corner away from where you're looking at the moment, and the students are indeed protesting these issues. Of course, we heard the Minister of Higher Education saying that funding will be reprioritized, and of course having a conversation with the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, who at this point has said that those students who deserve to be there, who should be getting funding, will not indeed be excluded. So of course we still see these protests continuing nonetheless, and we'll get an idea as to what the students are fighting for at this time, and those that have joined these protests, and whether or not the issues that the Wits students are experiencing are also the same issues that UJ students are then experiencing. We know that as Griselda was reporting a couple of years ago, similar situation, fees must fall protest. There was an issue at some point at the University of Johannesburg where there was even a stampede at some point. So these are issues that students have been dealing with for many, many years. You would have heard my conversation with the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, asking if there is a permanent solution to this. It seems that we kind of put a small bandage on an issue which is really, I mean, this exposes the fact that there's a huge issue which can't just have, you know, a small bandage attached to it or put on it to make it stop. So indeed, I'm being told by the ministry that they are looking at different measures, and also asking that perhaps students also look at other institutions of higher learning, whether it be TVTs, and getting other sorts of skills. Those are some of the issues that we spoke about with the Deputy Minister of Higher Education. I'm going to call back Dr. Sean Muller, and my apologies, Dr. Muller, for having interrupted our conversation there. Of course, you saw we had some breaking news coming out from the streets of the CBD, rather, of the city centre there in Johannesburg. Just to continue on our conversation, I mean, you're looking at these visuals, Dr. Muller. What do you make of these protests that are taking place currently by students demanding essentially what was in fact a promise to them? I mean, what goes through your mind when you see these sort of protests? I mean, we see now students from UJ, it seems, are now marching in solidarity with those at Wits, and no doubt we'll get to hear perhaps similar issues at the University of Johannesburg as well. I mean, what do you think when you see all of this?
Well, I think it takes us back to where our conversation ended, you know, when we crossed to that live footage, which is that, you know, I was saying that the sort of technical issues about funding allocation and lack of coordination between the Treasury and the Department of Higher Education and Training and so forth are not issues that students should be having to deal with. The students are kind of on the receiving end of the consequences of that, and I think it's quite an indictment on the government that despite actually a massive increase in funding from about 10 billion to about 35 billion, we're still seeing this happening because the government has to some extent overpromised and underdelivered, but also because in this particular instance, the budget allocation doesn't seem to have matched the promises that institutions in the Department of Higher Education and Training made. So that's an error on the part of government. And, you know, if students have found themselves in situations where they're expecting to register and they've been told they don't have funding support, even though they're promised that from the government, then it's hardly surprising that they're angry and frustrated. This is the problem of overpromising and under-delivering.
I wonder, Dr. Muller, if, you know, one of the issues that you might perhaps be picking up, and especially being someone who's on campus regularly as a lecturer, the issue of space. I mean, one wonders if, you know, maybe it's not as easy as this, but, you know, if I look at it, I'm thinking to myself, is there no way that, you know, government can take some of these billions that, of course, you know, every government has, and put it towards building, you know, new infrastructure, new universities? We're hearing the minister and the deputy minister saying that students should also be looking at alternatives and looking at TVET colleges, for example. But, you know, if these students want degrees, surely there should be a way for them to be able to get those degrees. And I'm wondering if it's as simple as, let's build more universities, let's see what more we can do, instead of trying to squash all the students in one place. Can we not do more than this?
Right. Thanks, Flo. I mean, the thing is, it is a bit of a complex issue. The broad question is about enrollment into the higher education system. There's been greater recognition in recent years that, in the post-1994 era, there's been an overemphasis on universities and not enough recognition of the importance of TVETs. So there has been, a positive shift in that direction. But one of the things we also see is the chasm between students who can get into the higher education system and get access to support and those young people who can't. And what I was saying, to one of your colleagues earlier, is that those young people who can't get into the system get little or no support from the state at all. So it becomes a massive issue for students. So that's the one thing. But the other thing to understand is that the funding formula for universities, because you remember you need to separate NSFAS funding from university funding. Yeah. So NSFAS funding is kind of channeled towards students at the moment. Universities get funded based on a funding formula, which partly takes into account the enrollment of students. So when a university says that they don't have space, what they're really saying is that they've agreed a particular level of enrollment with the Department of Higher Education and Training and funding corresponding to that. So it's not just, so if they take in more students, DHET will say, well, we agreed that you could take in 100,000. You've taken in 120,000. We're not going to fund the other 20,000. So you're going to have to find the funds to cover your costs on that yourselves. So that's also partly where the issue of space comes in. But I think there's another thing to say, which it comes back to our original point, which is that higher education is something that we should aspire for all students who could qualify for university to have access to. Yeah. But it is costly, and we need to remember that there are other crucial parts of society and social service delivery areas that are not being adequately funded. So there are these difficult trade-offs to be made. It is important to remember that the NSFAS budget has increased from 10 billion to 35 billion. So there actually has been a massive increase. And I must say, it's not a popular view, but my view is actually that the extent of the promises made by President Zuma were never likely to be feasible, given the constraints we face in South Africa on the public finance side, given that basic education is underfunded, health is underfunded, housing is underfunded, water is underfunded. Most things are underfunded, right? And we need to understand that access to higher education, unfortunately, is a privilege. And we need to try and reduce the extent to which it's a privilege. But at the same time, we need to remember that there are many, many millions, tens of millions of people in this country who are not getting the services that they deserve, who are not actually having their rights in the Constitution fulfilled. And so that there is a trade-off to be made there, and I think we need to keep sight of that.
All right, Dr. Sean Muller, thank you so very much for staying with us and continuing on this conversation and availing yourself to us this afternoon. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that's Dr. Sean Muller, lecturer the School of Economics at the University of Johannesburg. They're speaking to us, and in fact UJ students indeed joining in solidarity with Wits students during the Wits protests that are taking place. And really, as you saw those students passing, really literally passing right where we are at this time and walking from Bunting and in fact heading to the other campus where they will continue then with their protests, I assume. All right, we're going to take a short